Welcome to the Crypto Layer HQ. Today we will be analyzing different ways to value Bitcoin. So the most common way is against the dollar. And this is one way to look at Bitcoin's value. But of course, the dollar is constantly being devalued as more and more dollars are constantly printed. So like most assets, Bitcoin will continue to rise in price versus the dollar. So I don't think this is the best way to measure how much value Bitcoin is gaining. A better way would be against the S&P. So as we can see, even against the S&P, Bitcoin is still gaining in value. The S&P is the most common way to compare different assets to, because the S&P, hedge funds, etc., they're benchmarked against the S&P to see if they're doing good or bad. Because if a hedge fund only gets a 5% return, but the S&P that year did 20% return, then you would consider that they underperformed the S&P by 15%. So that's why the S&P is a very good way to look at things. We can see Bitcoin on the long term is outperforming the S&P. We can see just recently it's underperforming the S&P, but still it gives us a good way to know when we're potentially at undervalued areas. I would say if we were anywhere in this zone, that would definitely be a great entry point, as Bitcoin was trading at these prices against the S&P, for back in 2024 and even in 2023 and 2022 and even 2021. So you would essentially be buying Bitcoin where it's trading against the S&P at a very good price. Now, another way to look at Bitcoin is against gold. So gold as well is another good way to measure Bitcoin against, as gold is also considered a store of value. We can see over a long period of time, Bitcoin still does manage to outperform gold. But of course, recently it's underperformed gold. And now if you're only looking at this chart, you would say, okay, Bitcoin's at a very good price in terms of price in gold, since we're at pretty low levels now, since we were at those prices back in also 2022, 2023, and even in 2018 at the top of the bear market, Bitcoin was priced at this valuation in Bitcoin, in gold. Of course, that doesn't mean this is the best entry. We could potentially go lower. Maybe we retest this level. Could end up getting something like this, which could give a good entry point. Of course, gold has been having a historical rally over the last few months and even over the last couple years. So that has a big impact on why Bitcoin versus gold is underperforming. Another way we can measure Bitcoin is against silver. So if we look at Bitcoin versus silver, again, Bitcoin has outperformed it over a long period of time, but we can see recently it's severely underperformed. And against silver, you could say Bitcoin is at a good price now. So potentially, if you did own silver, rotating silver into Bitcoin wouldn't be such a bad idea potentially, since we are basically near lows over, even we trade at these points in 2018, 2019, even 2021, 2022, 2023. So price in silver, Bitcoin is a very good deal right now. And yeah, I would say those are some of my favorite ways to measure Bitcoin's value and how it's performing.